The first thing I noticed about the valley was the quiet. Not the quiet of emptiness, the quiet of something settled, a valley that had found its rhythm and was content inside it. Frost on the heather, wood smoke rising in a thin thread from the stone cottage at the far end of the clearing, and wolves, a great many wolves. I pulled Aldrich to a halt at the ridge line and counted. 7, 8, 11. Once the gray pair by the water trough separated from the shadow I'd mistaken for a single animal. 11 wolves lying in the pale morning light around a cottage that had no business being on Veldrath land at all. They were not prowling. They were not watching the ridge with the coiled attention of wild wolves. They were sleeping, 2 of them, the nearest with its muzzle pressed against the stone step of the door, as though it meant to follow whoever was inside the moment that door opened. My jaw tightened. I had spent 5 years building a pack that could hold the northern border. 5 years of discipline, of decisions that cost me sleep, and cost me men who'd been with my father before me, men who understood, as I did, that a wolf kingdom's strength is only as real as its weakest wolf. The Veldrath hold sat at the head of the pass, and the pass was the only route the eastern clans used when they rode west with fire and intent. We had held it for 4 generations. My father had held it with 36 wolves and a wall. I held it with 22 wolves and a creed, no weakness in the pack. A wolf who could not run, could not fight, could not hold the pass, a wolf who was wounded beyond the point of use, was expelled, sent south into the valleys, sent away from the hold and from the bond that made us what we were. It was not cruelty, it was arithmetic. A wounded wolf in the shield line was a gap in the shield line. So I told myself. What I had not told myself, what I had not permitted myself to notice, was that 11 expelled wolves had apparently found their way to the same valley, to the same stone cottage, to the same woman who should not have been here at all. There was no settlement at Asheville. There had been a shepherd's family here, 3 winters past, but they had moved north to Havard when the border raids grew worse. The valley was unoccupied. That was why I'd left it unoccupied. A wolf king does not post sentries in an empty valley, and a wolf king does not ride 20 miles south to investigate wood smoke in the heather, unless a scout brings him a report that makes him set down his cup very carefully and ask the scout to repeat what he has just said. 11 wolves, the scout had said. A woman, a cottage. She has been here for 2 years. 2 years. I had been expelling wolves for 5, which meant that for 3 of those 5 years, at least one of my expelled wolves had been finding its way here, to her, and I had not known. I urged Aldrich down the slope. The wolves heard us before we reached the flat, of course they did. These were not wild animals, their senses were pack sharp, and a wolf that has been bonded to a kingdom does not lose that sharpness just because a king has driven it out. 3 of them were on their feet by the time I reached the water trough. 2 more lifted their heads from where they lay against the cottage's south wall. But none of them moved toward me, and none of them moved away. They watched me with the particular attention of wolves, who are waiting to see what a man intends before they decide what they intend. I recognized the big black one by the trough, Oren. He had been expelled 2 years ago, a leg injury from a raid that hadn't healed cleanly. I had told my captain that Oren was dead to the pack, and I had believed it was the hard truth and the only truth. Oren was standing on 4 legs, both of them. I had barely registered this when the cottage door opened. She did not see me at first. She came out with a basket of dried moss, the kind used for poultices, balanced on her hip, and she was already talking to the wolf on the step before she looked up. "Move, Bran," she said. "I'll be back before noon. You don't have to follow me." She stepped around Bran with the ease of someone who has navigated a wolf on a doorstep many times, pulled the door shut behind her, looked up and stopped. She was not afraid. That was the first thing I noticed about her, the second thing after the quiet of the valley. A woman alone in a valley with 11 wolves, a rider coming down from the ridge with the Veldrath seal on his chest, and she was not afraid. She was curious. Her head tilted slightly, the way a person's does when they are reassessing something they thought they understood, and then she set her basket down on the step and straightened. "You'll be from the hold," she said. It was not a question. "I am the hold," I said. She looked at me for a moment, not at the seal, not at the blade at my hip, at me, and then she nodded once, as if this confirmed something she had expected but had not been in a hurry to meet. "Then you'd better come in," she said. "You've been riding since before first light, and your left side has been troubling you since the ridge. I could see it in how you sit the horse." I opened my mouth to tell her I had not come here to sit in her cottage, that I had come to tell her she was on Veldrath land without permission, and that she had 2 days to gather what she owned and move south to Havard where she belonged. I had the words arranged. I had rehearsed them on the ride down, in the way that a man rehearses things he knows are necessary and would rather not say. Instead I said, "It is not troubling me." She looked at my left side, then at my face. Then she picked up her basket and went back inside, and after a moment she left the door open behind her. I sat on Aldrich for another breath. Orin had lowered himself back to the ground by the trough. Bran had resumed his post on the step, though he shifted slightly to one side to leave room for the door to have been left open. I dismounted, tied Aldrich to the post, and was faintly aware as I did it that I had not planned to do this either. The inside of the cottage was not what I had expected, though I would not have been able to say what I had expected. It was larger than it looked from outside. The shepherd's family had built solidly, and it smelled of dried herbs and pine resin and wood smoke, and something underneath all of those things that I could not name, something that made the inside of my chest go very still in a way I did not immediately recognize as notable. There were bundles of dried plants hanging from the ceiling beams, neatly ordered by some system I could not immediately read. A small fire in the grate, a table with a pestle on it and 2 cups, and a pot that was already beginning to steam. She had put the pot on before she came outside. She had known I would come in. "Sit," she said, and nodded at the bench by the fire. "And take off the riding coat. The cold makes the muscles clench and that won't help. There is nothing wrong with my... There is a border-raid scar on your left side that you opened again approximately 4 days ago," she said, in the unhurried way of someone who is simply reporting what they can see. "It did not close cleanly the first time, which is a pity, and you've been keeping it bandaged under the coat, which is why you're holding your seat the way you are. The set of a man's shoulders tells you a great deal about where he hurts. I'm not guessing." She began adding things to the pot from the bundles above the table. "Sit down. I'll look at it." I sat down. I did not decide to sit down. I sat down the way a man sits down when the logic of a situation has outrun his objections, and he is still searching for new objections, but his body has already conceded the argument. She brought the cup and set it on the bench beside me. "Drink that first. It'll take the edge off the fever." "I do not have a fever." "Your eyes are bright," she said. "Not in a good way. Drink." I drank. It was bitter and then warm and then, oddly, it tasted like nothing at all, which I had come to understand, in my years of sending wounded wolves away, was the specific taste of something that is working. She waited until I'd set the cup down, and then she said simply, "May I?" and waited for my answer. I nodded. She helped me out of the riding coat with no fanfare and no hesitation, and she unwound the bandage I'd wrapped myself 4 mornings ago on the road, and she looked at what was underneath, and she was quiet for a moment. "It's infected," she said. "I know. Did you know 4 days ago?" "I suspected." "And you rode 20 miles anyway." "There were things to attend to." She was quiet again for another moment. Then she went to the shelf and came back with a different jar, and she sat on the small stool in front of the bench, and she began to clean the wound with hands that did not tremble and did not hesitate and did not make me feel, even once, like a man being managed. She made me feel, in a way that was entirely unfamiliar, like a man being taken care of. There is a difference, though I would not have known to name it before that morning. Being managed is a thing done to you. Being taken care of is a thing done alongside you, with your permission, and for your sake. You're the one who's been taking in my expelled wolves, I said. They came to me, she said. I didn't go looking for them. On Veldreth land. The valley is not garrisoned, I checked. She did not look up from her work. And there is a shepherd's right of use. Any unoccupied holding may be used by a healer in practice, provided they do not. I know the law, I said. Then you know I'm within it. I looked down at the top of her head. She had dark hair, pinned simply, with one strand loose against her neck. Her hands were steady and sure and slightly roughened from work, and they did not falter even when I made a sound I had not intended to make as she worked at a part of the wound that had gone worse than I'd acknowledged. You healed Oren, I said after a moment. The leg, yes. That injury was supposed to be permanent. She looked up then, for the first time since she'd begun working. Her eyes were a warm gray, the color of the heather in November, and they looked at me with an expression I could not immediately categorize, not anger, not resentment, but something measured and considered and honest. It was not permanent, she said. It needed 2 months of careful treatment and then another 2 months of managed exercise before full weight. It was inconvenient, not fatal, and not permanent. He could not hold the pass. For 4 months, she said. You expelled him rather than wait 4 months. I said nothing. She looked at me for another moment, and then she went back to work, and the silence between us was not comfortable. It was not the quiet of the valley, which was a settled quiet. This was a pointed quiet, a quiet that asked things and waited, but it was also not hostile. It was the silence of someone who has something to say and is deciding whether to say it, and has decided for now that the work in front of her matters more than the argument. The others, I said eventually, the 11. 12, she said. Birch came in last week, the white one near the east wall. She had a puncture wound that had gone septic. She'll be well in another fortnight. 12. How many of them are permanent? She tied off the new bandage with a neat knot. None of them. 2 have required long recovery, Oren and a brindle called Smoke who came in spring with a broken rib that had healed crooked. Smoke's rib took 6 months of splinting and careful work. He's now, I would say, structurally sound, though not at full sprint. The others needed between 2 weeks and 3 months. She stood and began to put things away. You expelled 12 wolves in 5 years. Not one of them needed to be gone permanently. I should have argued. I had the arguments, the hold, the pass, the eastern clans, the arithmetic of a shield line that could not accommodate a gap. I had believed those arguments for 5 years, and I believed them still, in the way that a man goes on believing a thing that has become the foundation of how he lives, because to stop believing it is to look at what you have built on it. I did not argue. I sat on the bench by the fire in a healer's cottage in the valley of Asheville, and I watched Wren. I did not know her name was Wren yet. I learned it an hour later when she handed me another cup of something and told me she was Wren of Havard, healer, widow 3 years. And if I intended to ride back today, she would tell me plainly that I should not. And I understood that the quiet of the valley had been here all along, and I had not known it because I had not come here. Stay, she said later. Not an invitation, a prescription. The fever will peak tonight. You'll be worse on Aldrich than you are sitting still, and you'll be worse tomorrow if you push it today. I cannot stay. You can send word to the hold from the ridge, she said. There is a man in Havard who runs messages north every 3rd morning. He went yesterday, so he'll go again the day after tomorrow. That gives you 2 days. She looked at me steadily. You need 2 days. Your body has been arguing the case for longer than I have. I sent the message from the ridge. Aldrich found the path himself, which told me he had been on it before, or that he trusted the direction more than I was managing to, and I came back down into the valley and went back into the cottage and sat by the fire, and the wolves came in from the cold as the sun dropped, one by one, and arranged themselves across the floor in a manner that was specific and accustomed, each wolf in its usual place, with the ease of animals who know where they belong. The fever came in the night, as she had said it would. She was there when it did. She had not gone to sleep, or she had slept briefly and heard me when I stopped being still, and she put wet cloths against my forehead and spoke to me in a low voice about nothing in particular, the valley, the frost, a hawk she had seen 2 days ago that had been carrying something too large for it and had looked very determined about it. And I drifted in and out of something between sleep and not sleep while she spoke, and the thing I noticed, even in the fog of the fever, was the scent, pine smoke and something older, the particular smell of a place where something is tended rather than used, where the air itself has been breathed into warmth. It lived in my chest, that scent, with a steadiness that was nothing like discomfort. It was the specific steadiness of a thing that has settled somewhere it is supposed to be. I did not think about this clearly until I was well, but it was there from that first night, a stillness behind my sternum that I had no useful name for and did not press, because the fever had reduced my surplus thoughts to what was essential, and what was essential, that night, was the sound of her voice and the cooling cloth, and the knowledge that someone was awake and tending. I had not had that in a very long time. I was a wolf king. I had a hold full of warriors and a pack of 22. I had a council and a captain and a cook who kept the hall fed, and a man who maintained the watchtower and 100 people whose livelihoods were bound to Veldreth and who depended on me to hold the pass. There was no shortage, in my life, of people in proximity. But there was no one awake and tending. That is a different thing altogether. I woke in the morning clear-headed and sore and hungry, and Wren was at the fire making something that smelled like grain and herbs, and the wolf called Bran was asleep with his head on my feet, which I discovered when I tried to stand and could not without moving him. "Don't move him," she said without turning. "He'll be offended. He is on my feet. He knows when someone's been ill. He does it for comfort." She did not specify whose comfort. I looked down at Bran. He was a large wolf, not so large as the pack-bred wolves at the hold, but large enough, a tawny brown with one ear that sat at a slightly different angle than the other, the remnant of an old wound. I could not immediately remember which of my expelled wolves he was. He was not one I remembered clearly, which meant he had left early in the 5 years, which meant he had been here longer than any of them. "What was his injury?" I asked. "A sword cut across the right shoulder," she said. "He healed in 6 weeks mostly. The ear was already like that." 6 weeks. He had been expelled for what would have been a 6-week recovery. I ate the grain and herb thing from a bowl, sitting on the bench with Bran's head still on my feet, and I watched the morning light come through the cottage's east window and fall across the bundles of dried herbs, and I tried to do the arithmetic that I had always done, the pass, the shield line, the eastern clans, and found that the arithmetic felt different now. Not wrong, but different. The way a calculation feels different when you realize you have been leaving out a variable. I had been counting wolves as either in the pack or gone. In the pack, capable, present, contributing. Gone, absent, subtracted, irrelevant to the line. What I had not counted, what I had not permitted myself to count, was the category that had existed here in Asheville for 2 years without my knowledge. Wolves who were gone and then returned. Wolves who, under the hand of a woman I had not known existed, became capable again. Wolves who, in my arithmetic, were subtracted, but who were, in fact, waiting. Waiting in a valley 20 miles south of the hold they had been expelled from, eating her food and sleeping under her roof, and lifting their heads when a rider came down from the ridge with the Veldreth seal on his chest, and then deciding, on the basis of something I could not quantify, not to move. They had not moved, 12 wolves and not one had moved. I thought about that. Then I got up carefully. The side was better but not healed, and went outside and found Oren by the water trough and sat down on the low wall beside him in the cold morning air. Oren looked at me. He was not a demonstrative wolf. He had been one of my steadiest pack animals before the injury, calm, reliable, the kind of wolf you could trust to hold a position without instruction because he understood the position. Looking at him now with 4 good legs and the early light on his coat, I thought, I expelled this wolf because he could not run for 4 months. And I thought, I did not know that at the time, I thought he would not run again. And then I thought I did not ask. I had not asked Ren, the healer who was treating him, because there was no Ren at that point, no healer, no cottage, no one tending these animals in the valley below the hold. They had simply been expelled into the south, and I had moved on because that was the creed, and the creed was the hold, and the hold was the pass, and the pass was what I was for. I had not asked if permanent was actually permanent. Oren put his head on my knee. It was an uncomplicated gesture, and I sat very still inside it, because an alpha king does not show the particular feeling that gesture produced in me, and there was no one here to see me but 12 wolves and a healer, and possibly the hawk Ren had mentioned, who may or may not have been watching from the dead oak at the valley's edge. Kadrin. I looked up. Ren was standing in the doorway with a cup. Come in. It's too cold to be out there being thoughtful at a wolf. I came in. The second day was quieter. The fever was gone and I did not need tending, which meant there was no immediate occupation for either of us, and I found that I was not in a hurry to leave. This was not something I had anticipated. I had anticipated coming, addressing the issue of the healer on Veldrath land, and returning to the hold with the matter concluded. The matter was not concluded. The matter was, in fact, significantly more complicated than I had written down expecting, and I had a side that was healing, and a fever that had only just broken, and a scout who had told me 11 wolves and turned out to mean 12. And in the absence of any pressing reason to leave before the morning of the 3rd day, I stayed. Ren moved through the 2nd day with the same unhurried purpose she brought to everything, mixing things, checking on wolves, making notes in a small book that she did not offer to explain, and that I did not ask about. She spoke when she had something to say and was quiet when she did not, and the quiet was the same settled quiet as the valley, not the absence of speech, but the presence of something that did not require speech to be comfortable. I watched her with Smoke, the brindle wolf with the healed rib, and the watching told me things that the talking had not. She moved around these animals with the specific confidence of someone who has learned them over time, who knows which one wants to be acknowledged immediately, and which one prefers to come to you, which one is skittish about the left side, and which one is best approached from below. She had 12 wolves and she knew every one of them, not as a group but individually, and they received her in kind. Late in the 2nd afternoon, she found me sitting at the table reading the small book. She had left it there, not hidden, just set down, and she stopped in the doorway and looked at me. I set it down. I apologize, I said. She crossed the room and picked it up and looked at what page I'd been reading. Then she sat down across the table. Those are your wolves, she said. I know. The ones that came with their dates and their injuries noted. I can see that. She turned the book around so it was facing me and opened it to the first page. There were 12 entries, and the earliest one was dated 3 years and 4 months ago. Bran. Sword cut to the right shoulder, approximate age 4 years, slight deformity of the left ear likely pre-existing. The entry went on for half a page, arrival condition, treatment, progress, and then at the bottom, in a notation that was slightly different from the clinical record, he chose to stay when recovered. I did not ask him to. I read that line twice. They all chose to stay, I said. All of them, she leaned back. Oren left twice. He went north each time and came back in a few days. He has not been north in 8 months. I looked at the book, at the 12 entries, at the dates. Why did you take them in? I said. She considered this as she always considered things, without rushing, without performing the consideration, just actually doing it. The first one came in the dark, she said. Bran. He came to the door at night in the middle of autumn, and he was bleeding, and he sat down in front of the door and looked at me. And I thought, I know how to help this, so I helped it. She paused. After that, they kept coming. Word travels somehow among wolves, I don't entirely know how. By spring there were 4 of them, and by the following autumn there were 7, and by this past winter there were 12. And each time a new one arrived, I thought, I know how to help this. It is not a small undertaking, I said, 12 wolves. It isn't, she agreed. But the valley has good hunting and adequate shelter, and they are, as it turns out, quite helpful about things like wood and watching the perimeter, so it evens out. Wolves don't bring wood. They bring the wood I've cut to the door, she said, which is more or less the same thing. I looked at her, she was serious. Wren, I said, and she went slightly still when I said her name, not alarmed but attentive, the way you go still when you hear something that matters. I came here to tell you to leave. I know. The shepherd's right of use has a time limit, 2 years and 1 season. You've been here for 2 years and 3 months. I know that as well, she said. I should still tell you to leave. But you're not, she said. Not today, I said, not while the side is still. Not today, she agreed quietly. I went asleep on the second night with 12 wolves distributed across the cottage floor, and Wren on the other side of the low partition that divided the sleeping space from the main room, and the particular scent of the place, pine smoke and that older thing, was in my chest again, sitting there quietly and making no demands. I was aware of it in the way that you are aware of something that has always been there, but that you have not had the occasion to notice before. It was on the 3rd morning that dusk came back. I heard the commotion before I was fully awake, a sound in the pack that was not distress but was excitement, the high, swift sound of wolves greeting something they had been waiting for. I was at the door before Wren, which surprised both of us, and I stood in the early gray light and looked at the wolf standing at the edge of the clearing. He was bigger than I remembered. 3 years will do that to a wolf, add weight to the shoulders, settle something in the carriage that is not there in a younger animal. His coat had gone from the dark brindle I remembered to something darker still, the color of sky just before full dark, and he was looking at me with yellow eyes that I recognized in the specific way that you recognize a thing you have loved. Dusk, I said. Dusk had been my bonded wolf. Every alpha king bonds once with a wolf who is his particular companion, not merely a pack animal, but the one who runs alongside him, who knows his mood, who is present in the way that no human advisor is present, without agenda and without fear. Dusk and I had bonded when I was 19, and he had been with me through the first border raids and through my father's illness, and through the long, difficult years of building the hold into something that could hold the pass. He had been with me when I made the creed about the pack. He had been there when I made the first expulsion, and the second, and the 5th. And then, 3 years ago, in a border raid that had cost us 2 men and 4 wolves and a section of the east wall, Dusk had been wounded. Not fatally, a gash across the flank, deep but not into anything essential. But he had not returned to the hold after the raid. I had searched for him for 2 weeks, and then, because a king does not stop searching publicly for a wolf beyond 2 weeks without undermining the creed he has built the pack on, I had stopped. Privately I had looked for another year. I had not found him. He had been here, 20 miles south of the hold, in Asheville Valley, with a healer who took in the wolves that a king with a creed had decided he could not keep. Dusk crossed the clearing in the particular loping way of a wolf who is not hurrying, but will cover the distance quickly regardless, and he stopped in front of me and looked at me for a long moment, the yellow eyes doing the specific assessment that bonded wolves do, reading the state of the thing they are bonded to, and then he pressed his head against my chest. I put my hand on him. He was warm and solid and real. 3 years of not knowing resolved into the simple fact of him standing here, and the creed, and the arithmetic, and the pass. All of it was still there, still necessary, still the responsibility I carried. But it was smaller, suddenly, in the specific way that a thing becomes smaller when you are in the presence of something that mattered more than you had permitted yourself to remember. Wren was standing in the doorway. I looked at her over Dusk's head. She was watching us with no expression I could immediately read, not triumphant, not sad, something patient and steady that had been there all along. She had known. She had known Dusk was mine. The book would have had his entry, dated 3 years ago, and she would have connected it to the Veldrath seal on my chest the moment she'd seen me. She had not said so. She had let me come to it. "You knew he was mine," I said. "Yes. Since I arrived. Since before you arrived. I had a fair idea once the scout came." "You didn't tell me." "You didn't ask," she said, "and it seemed like something you needed to find in its own time." I looked at her. The morning light was low and pale, and it caught the loose strand of hair against her neck, and the wolves were arranged around her in the doorway in the specific configuration of animals who have decided where they belong. And I was standing in the clearing of a valley, 20 miles south of the hold, with my bonded wolf's head against my chest, and a healer who had spent 2 years tending what I had thrown away. And the stillness behind my sternum that I had been carrying since the first night was not a fever symptom. I understood this with a clarity that came in the way of things that have been true for some time, and are only now being acknowledged. I crossed the clearing. Dusk moved with me, which was not a thing I asked or signaled. He simply moved, the way a bonded wolf moves with the thing he is bonded to, the natural coordination of 2 creatures who have spent enough time together that the motion requires no instruction. I stopped in front of Wren. She looked up at me. "You're going to tell me to leave the valley," she said. "No," I said. A small pause. "No. I am going to ask you," I said, "what it would take to move this, all of it, the wolves, the practice, the small book with its 12 entries to the hold." She was quiet for a moment. Dusk sat down between us with great deliberateness and put his muzzle on Wren's hand, which was hanging at her side, and I watched her look down at him and then back up at me. "That's a significant change from 2 days ago," she said. "2 days ago I had a fever," I said. "You didn't have a fever when you woke up this morning." "I had a fever of a different kind this morning," I said, "when Dusk came back." She looked at me for a long time with those gray eyes that did not hurry and did not soften unnecessarily, and did not pretend that what was happening was simpler than it was. She was not a woman who performed feelings for the comfort of the person she was talking to. She was a woman who felt them quietly and considered them seriously, and gave them back to you when she had decided what they were. "You'll have to undo the creed," she said. "If the wolves come back, the pack will want to know why you sent them away in the first place, and why they're being recalled." "I will undo it," I said. "That will cost you something with the men who have believed it." "Yes," I said, "it will." "And you'd still do it." "I have 12 reasons in this valley and one very large one standing between us," I said. "Yes, I would still do it." She looked down at Dusk. He was still holding his muzzle on her hand with the patient persistence of a wolf who has made a decision. "He's done that since the 2nd week," she said. "Put his head on my hand. I never taught him to do it." "He did it to me," I said. "From the time he was a pup. It means he's decided you're part of his." I paused. "I should tell you a bonded wolf does not do that lightly. He does not extend the bond. He never has before." Wren looked up. It was then, with her eyes on mine and Dusk's muzzle on her hand, and the morning settling into the valley in its particular way, that the mate mark woke on my wrist. I felt it before I saw it, a warmth that was not the wound's warmth, clean and rising, the specific heat of something that has been waiting for the right conditions to make itself known. I looked down. On the inside of my wrist, just above the pulse point, a mark was spreading in the light, not golden exactly, but the color of light on frost, silver bright and definite, the Veldrath mark in a shape I had never seen before and recognized immediately. I had heard of this. Every wolf king has heard of it. The mate mark appears once, for one person, and it is not possible to mistake it for anything else. I lifted my wrist and showed her. Ren looked at it. She did not gasp. She did not step back. She looked at it with the same serious consideration she brought to everything, and then she turned her own left wrist over slowly, and there it was, the same mark, the same light on her skin, answering mine. "I didn't know what it was," she said quietly. "I thought it was a fever symptom. It's been there since the first night." "It has been on my wrist since the first night," I said. "I did not know either." We looked at each other over our wrists, over dusk, over 12 wolves who had stopped pretending to do anything other than watch. "Ask me properly," Ren said. I went down on one knee in the frost in front of the cottage door. Dusk got out of the way with the dignity of a wolf who has been waiting for this specific moment and considers it long overdue. I took her marked wrist in both hands, and I looked up at her and I said, "Ren of Havard, I am a king who made a creed out of a fear I would not name, and threw away things of value because it was easier than waiting for them to heal. You have spent 2 years tending what I discarded. The mark says you are mine, and I will not pretend otherwise, and I will not pretend I deserve it. But I am asking, will you come to Veldrath?" She looked down at me for a long moment. "Get up," she said. I got up. "You have to understand," she said, "that I will tell you when you are wrong. I have been doing it since you sat down on my bench 2 days ago, and I will keep doing it. A woman who has spent 2 years saying yes to 12 wounded wolves has a certain difficulty with saying nothing when something seems wrong to her." "I know," I said. "I have noticed." "And you would want that, a healer in the hold who will tell the Alpha King he is wrong." "I would," I said, "badly. I have wanted it for 5 years and not known the shape of it until now." She looked at me for another moment. Dusk, who had moved aside but had not gone far, pressed against her left leg with his considerable weight, and she reached down and put her hand on his head. "Yes," she said, "I'll come." We did not leave the valley that day. I was not fully well, and the move required planning, and Ren had wolves to inform of a change in circumstances, which she did in the straightforward way she did everything. She simply walked out into the clearing and stood there for a moment, and 12 wolves gathered around her, and she spoke to them in a low voice that I could not entirely hear from where I stood in the doorway, and I watched them listen. By evening 4 of them had ranged north toward the hold on their own initiative, as though they had been waiting for the word. The other 8 remained. "They'll come in their own time," Ren said, "when it feels safe." "It is safe," I said. "I will make it safe." "I know," she said. "They need to know it for themselves. It's different." "It is different." I understood this now, in a way I had not 2 days ago. Safety that is declared and safety that is learned in the body are not the same thing, and a wolf who has been expelled once will need time to trust that the expelling is done. That was fair. I had made them need that time. We left on the 4th morning. Ren packed the cottage methodically, the herbs bundled and wrapped, the small book in her coat pocket, the pestle wrapped in a cloth. She left the door unlocked, which I started to comment on, and then did not, because the wolf called Birch was still recovering and would need to use the shelter for another fortnight, and I understood without being told that it was Birch's cottage until Birch was ready. The ride north took most of the day. Dusk ran beside us, not ahead, not ranging beside, and the 4 wolves who had gone north the evening before met us at the ridge line as though they had been waiting, which perhaps they had. The hold emerged from the morning haze in the late afternoon, gray stone and high walls and the watchtower flag moving in the wind off the pass. I watched Ren look at it. "It's a great deal of stone," she said. "Yes, and rather serious looking." "It is a serious hold. The pass requires it." "I don't doubt it," she said. "I only meant that it will be a change from the valley." There will be a room for the herbs, I said, and a space for the practice, and a door you can lock if you want to lock it or leave open if you want to leave it open. She looked at me. You've been thinking about this. Since the second day, I said. A short pause. That was before dusk came back. Yes, I said, it was. She did not say anything to that, but something in the line of her shoulders changed slightly, in the way that things change when a person has heard something they did not expect to hear and are deciding what to do with it. We rode through the Hold's gate at dusk, which was fitting, and dusk preceded us through the gate by approximately 2 paces, which I thought he would carry with him in his bearing for some time. The pack was assembled in the yard. My captain had had the sense to gather them when the scout rode ahead, and they watched us come in with the attention of wolves who do not yet understand what they are seeing. I called the pack to the hall that night. All of them, the warriors and the council and the cook and the watchtower man. I stood at the head of the long table, and I told them what I should have told them years earlier, that the creed had been wrong. Not entirely, a wolf who cannot run cannot hold the pass, and the pass must be held, but the creed as I had lived it had made a false equation between permanent and temporary, between cannot and cannot yet, between gone and waiting to be returned. I told them about 12 wolves in a valley 20 miles south and a healer who had kept them, and I told them about Dusk, who was standing at my left side as I spoke. I told them what the mate mark on my wrist meant. I told them who Wren was. There was a silence after I finished. Then my captain, a man named Bale who had been with my father, and who had kept his own counsel through 5 years of expulsions with an expression I had read as agreement and now suspected had been something else entirely, said, "When do the 12 return?" "As they're ready," I said. "It may be some of them will not. It is their choice." Bale nodded. "Good," he said simply. The hall was quiet for another moment. Then someone at the far end of the table, one of the younger men, a wolf keeper named Soren who had come to the Hold 2 years ago and whom I had not heard express a strong opinion on anything, said, "The healer. Is she the one who healed Oren?" "Yes," I said. "I thought Oren was dead," Soren said. "So did I said. Another silence. Then Soren said, "Good," in exactly the same tone Bale had used, and someone else at the table said it too, and then several people, and the hall settled into a specific sound that was not cheering. It was quieter than cheering, more considered, but was unmistakably approval, the kind that comes from people who have been waiting to say a thing for a long time and have finally been given the occasion. Wren stood at the side of the hall through all of this, which I had noticed, and which she would tell me later had been intentional. She had not wanted to stand at the head of the table on the first night, because the first night was about the pack hearing from their king and not about her, and she had thought it would be clearer that way. She was right. She was right about a great many things, and the rate at which I was discovering this was notable. In the weeks that followed, the Hold changed. Not dramatically. It was still gray stone and high walls and a serious place at the head of a serious pass. But it changed the way a place changes when something that has been missing from it for a long time is finally present. Wren's room was in the east wing, near the courtyard with the light she said was better for the herbs, and the herbs were hanging from the beams within 3 days. And by the end of the first week, the hall smelled faintly of pine resin and dried valerian, which I would not have predicted would improve a war hold's atmosphere, and which turned out to improve it considerably. The 12 wolves came in over the following month. Not all at once, Wren had been right about that. They came in their own time and at their own pace, and each arrival was its own event. Bran came first, which did not surprise me. Oren came in the second week, which did not surprise me either. Smoke, the brindle with the healed rib, arrived on a Friday evening in the company of the wolf called Ash, and they were met at the gate by 4 of the Hold's wolves who had apparently already understood, without instruction from me, that the returned wolves were to be welcomed. The last to arrive was Birch, the white wolf with the healing puncture wound, who came in on a morning in late autumn with the specific confidence of a wolf who has taken her time, but is now satisfied with the decision. Bale watched Birch come through the gate and said, quietly, to no one in particular, 34. I looked at him. The pack, he said, 22 plus 12, 34, that's 4 more than your father held the pass with. I had not counted. I did the arithmetic now, standing at the gate in the late autumn light, and found that he was right. The creed had not made the pack stronger, it had made it smaller. Wren found me at the gate half an hour later, after Bale had gone, standing and looking at the pass with Dusk beside me. She came and stood on my other side and looked at the same thing I was looking at, which was the pass and the gray sky above the pass and the eastern horizon that had been the direction of trouble for 4 generations. 34, I said. I heard, she said. That's more than the hold has had since my grandfather's time. I know, Oren told me. I looked at her sideways. Oren told you. He indicated it, she said. He's quite communicative for a wolf. I looked at the pass. Then I held out my left wrist, the one with the mark, and she put her right wrist against it, mark to mark, the way we had done every evening since the valley, not a formal gesture, just a private one, something that had become its own small habit in the way that habits form between people who have found their way into each other's orbit and are content to stay there. The mark warmed under the contact. It always did. The pass is safe, I said. Yes, she said. The wolves are home. Most of them, she said, for now. A creed like the old one doesn't undo itself in a month, but yes, for now. And you are here, I said. She turned to look at me, and her eyes were the November heather color in the low light, and Dusk was a warm weight against my leg, and the hold behind us was full of wolves and wood smoke and 34 animals who had chosen to be here, including 12 who had been told they were not wanted and had waited in a valley 20 miles south for someone to be wrong about them. I am here, Wren said, for what it is worth. I looked at the pass and the gray sky and the eastern horizon. Then I looked at her. It is worth, I said, everything. She took my hand. The mate mark was warm against her palm, and she held it steadily in the way she held all things, without hurrying, without drama, with the particular quiet of a woman who has spent 2 years tending what others discarded and has come to understand, in the bone, the difference between something that is lost and something that is simply waiting to be found. That was the thing I came to know, in the months and years that followed, that I had not known before Asheville, that strength and hardness are not the same creed, that a wolf who cannot run today is not always a wolf who will not run tomorrow, that a valley 20 miles south of the hold you are trying to protect is not empty just because you have not gone to look, and that the woman who kept what you threw away, who sat on a stool in a fire-lit cottage and told you plainly that you were wrong, and was right about you from the first morning, is not a healer on a shepherd's right of use who came to tend your wounded wolves. She is the one who held the pass open for you, the whole time, in the only way that mattered. She knew, and she waited. And when you finally came down from the ridge with your creed and your seal and your infected side, she set down her basket, took one look at the set of your shoulders, and left the door open. It was the relic that knew it first. It was my bonded wolf who named it, but she had read it from the ridge, in the way a man sits a horse when he hurts and does not want to say so before I had crossed the clearing. The door had been open all along.